Tonight on Bridge City News, a second man has been charged following an on-ice incident at a Lethbridge Pee Wee hockey game. Manitoba's political leaders are putting out one last message ahead of today's provincial election. And the Army continues to help with cleanup efforts after Tropical Storm Dorian pounded the Maritimes.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will call on the Governor-General tomorrow morning to drop the writ which will officially start the election campaign. Then the major party leaders will take to their buses and planes for an election campaign which will culminate in a vote on October 21st. Even if Trudeau did not decide to call the campaign, everyone was already in election mode. Tory leader Andrew Scheer said he's beginning his official campaign tomorrow, and the NDP began theirs last weekend. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau headlined a rally in the Conservative riding of Carleton, Ontario, which is currently held by Tory MP Pierre Poilievre. He road-tested speech material as he addressed partisans inside the packed campaign office of local Liberal candidate Chris Rogers, who lost to Poilievre by less than 2,000 votes in 2015.
The only way to build a stronger future is to work hard in all sorts of different directions at the same time. Yes, we need to grow the economy in ways that works for everyone, but we also need to protect the environment at the same time. A strong choice to be made. And yes, we need our small businesses, our entrepreneurs, our workers to survive and thrive and do well and build and grow, but we also need to be taking care of each other. And that's why, over the past 4 years, Canadians have created over 1 million new jobs.
Former deputy leader of the Reform Party, Deborah Gray, stopped by our studio recently. Ms. Gray says when it comes to saving jobs, Justin Trudeau should not focus on Quebec, but remember us here as well in the West.
Justin was lobbying for, he said 9,000 jobs, turned out to be 3,500 that he was trying to save in Quebec. The last count I saw, and it's probably higher now, 130,000 unemployed in Alberta. And you go, woohoo, how about us up here? What about us out here in Western Canada?
Catch the full interview with former Reform Party MP Deb Gray and BCN's Paul Arthur coming up in the second half of our show. The Alberta government officially filed with the Alberta Court of Appeal today in connection with the federal government's Bill C-69, or as Premier Jason Kenney refers to it, the No More Pipelines Bill. The province said they would be launching a constitutional challenge against the bill, which was passed by the Senate in June. The appeal says C-69 is unconstitutional and needs to be changed. The bill deals with assessing industrial projects for the effects on public health, the environment, and the economy. Police have now charged a second man in connection with an on-ice incident where a referee and a coach were assaulted during a Pee Wee hockey game tournament here in Lethbridge. 36-year-old Todd William Crosschild of Lethbridge is charged with 2 counts of assault. Crosschild turned himself into police and will appear in court on October the 9th. 55-year-old Robert Farrell Creighton of Standoff is charged with 1 count of assault as well and will also appear in court next month. Now, it all stems from a game at the ATP Centre on Sunday. Reports say at the end of the match, a 10-year-old player was involved in an argument with a ref, which escalated to the youth striking the ref twice with his hockey stick. The ref pushed the young player to the ice. A coach from the opposing team was shoved to the ground, and the ref was punched multiple times by a player's relative. Suicide is never an easy topic to discuss, but having a national day to recognize its impacts can be a boon for those who focus on prevention. The Lethbridge Public Library hosted its 10th annual World Suicide Prevention Day today. As Loris Alexander reports, the group held the event to once again debunk myths and offer guidance to those who need it the most.
I have essentially messed up everything and believe the best way for us all to move forward is with my exit.
The heart-wrenching words from a suicide note read by a widow whose husband's life was claimed by mental illness. Today, Louise Riopel is here to speak out on the second biggest killer worldwide.
I wish I could have said something to my husband if I had only known. You need to talk. Talk to anybody, talk to your neighbor, talk to a stranger, reach out to somebody.
Talking about suicides prevents suicides, and that's what today is all about. That's why we have 8 presenters, some who are professionals and some who have a personal connection to suicide, to talk about suicide and to promote the message that suicide is preventable by talking about it.
Across the globe, 1 person takes their life every 40 seconds, according to a report by the World Health Organization. The report also found that nearly 3 times as many men as women die by suicide.
What happens with men, unfortunately, it's becoming a little bit better nowadays, but there still is kind of a taboo or stigma when it comes to talking about mental health or depression or emotions for men.
Since the minute my husband committed suicide, Lethbridge alone has been amazing for me and my children. Everybody in the community and our friends and family, but mostly our community and friends here, have been the hugest part of our healing.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
The Lethbridge hurricane season has crept up on hockey fans this fall. That can only mean that the U of L Pronghorns men's and women's hockey teams are about to hit the rink for some preseason action as well. Ainsley O'Reilly has a preview of what we can look forward to seeing this season.
Pronghorns hockey is back, and the men's team is quickly adjusting to 12 new players.
A lot of prep in getting the guys settled and getting academic schedules worked out, and then obviously hitting the ice.
Both the men's and the women's team have graduated a significant amount of their roster, and both coaches agree that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Everyone is coming from different experience.
I don't know, at the start, I'm going up against 25, 26-year-olds instead of 17 to 21-year-olds, so that's a big step physically and mentally.
I played last year in Nanaimo in the BCHL. Came here, found out I was coming here mid-June. So far it's been good. The guys are great. Obviously a lot of new faces.
On the women's side, they have a new coach, which the girls say has been a motivator to step up their physical fitness in the off-season.
Our strength and conditioning coach, she mentioned that the girls were in better shape. Their test results were better, their personal bests were higher, and the compete level in the fitness testing the first couple days was the best she'd seen. So very encouraging for me.
Just with the prospect of having a new coach, everybody wants to impress and have a really good start to their season and everything. So I think that kind of helped a lot of girls with motivation for training and all that kind of stuff over the summer, having a new coach.
The men's team hosts their first home game on September 21st and the women on the 27th. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Manitoba's political leaders made their final pitches to voters late yesterday ahead of today's provincial election. The Tories, seeking a second mandate, touted their promises of tax cuts. The NDP and Liberals, meanwhile, pitched themselves as the best alternative to another 4 years of Tory rule.
If you want better health care sooner with a $2 billion health care funding guarantee, there is only one choice tomorrow. If you want 20 more new schools built sooner, there's only one choice tomorrow. And if you want 2020 more dollars on your kitchen table, guaranteed, with no Trudeau carbon tax to punish you for going to work or heating your home or taking your children to hockey or soccer or ballet, there's only one choice tomorrow.
This really is a contest between Mr. Pallister's team and my own. Some of you may be in Conservative incumbent ridings, and you may like your local Conservative candidate. But the problem with voting for a local Conservative candidate is you end up with Mr. Pallister as Premier. And we know what that means. More cuts to health care, higher cost of living, and all sorts of squabbles between the Premier's office and other levels of government.
The recovery efforts in Nova Scotia following the destruction of post-tropical storm Dorian is now into its third day, and public schools remain closed. Nova Scotia Power says more than 100,000 customers are still without power. It says it has found about 3,700 trees on power lines, which caused extensive damage. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and 2 federal cabinet ministers were in Halifax earlier today surveying the damage. Canadian soldiers, meanwhile, fanned out across Halifax to help with the cleanup efforts.
So we are here to support the local authorities for the return to normal after the passage of Hurricane Dorian. So our main priority is to clear the roads and also to make sure that people who do not have electricity in their house, that they are safe. And so it means that we don't want anybody to use any combustible means to cook their food inside of their house, because we want to avoid any intoxication by carbon monoxide. We are not doing door-to-door. Our main purpose is to clear the roads. And the civilian we encounter, we talk to them and make sure that they are safe and give them safety instructions.
The Trump administration says evacuees fleeing the Bahamas from Hurricane Dorian are welcome in the United States because this is a humanitarian mission. The devastating hurricane killed 50 people and left hundreds of thousands homeless.
CBP, I've authorized the deployment of an enormous amount of resources to southern Florida to make sure that we can effectively receive people that are coming in from the Bahamas. Already we've received 2 cruise ships, thousands of folks that we have processed. Flights are coming in constantly. We've deployed additional folks out to even the small airports. We're reaching out to the aviation companies and corporations to coordinate. We're coordinating with the cruise ships every single day to make sure we can do that effectively in a timely process. That doesn't mean that we do this with a blind eye. We still have to balance the humanitarian need and assistance of those that need it versus the safety of this country. So we still will go through the process, but we're expediting that process, putting more resources down there. We're waiving the normal fees. I could go on and on with what we're doing to try to expedite the process, but keep in mind, there are still people that are inadmissible to this country. There are still people coming here that could have criminal convictions. We are going to process them and handle them normally to make sure this country is safe.
Rescue efforts continue by the U.S. Coast Guard, which pulled 4 men trapped alive from a capsized cargo ship. Rescuers drilled into the hull's steel plates to extract the crew members more than a day after the vessel overturned while leaving a Georgia port.
It's just a spectacular thing. I mean, for it to happen just like this, so close to the pier. But we're hoping that, everything will turn out okay, especially after the guys get, getting rescued and everything.
I hope that they're able to figure out something to get this mess cleaned up soon.
Vaping has become quite popular across North America, especially with the younger generation. Do we know for sure if it is really safe? New York State will now require health warning signs in shops that sell vaping devices following hundreds of cases of lung illnesses believed to be related to the habit.
This is a frightening public health phenomenon. It's an activity that many young people engage in. And common sense says if you don't know what you are smoking, don't smoke it. And right now, we don't know what you're smoking in a lot of these vaping substances, etc. The Department of Health is starting an investigation into some of these companies that produce vaping substances to find out exactly what is in it. There has been some evidence that vitamin E acetate, which is used in many of these vaping products, has significant health risks associated with it.
Peace talks between the United States and the Taliban are over for now. U.S. President Donald Trump abruptly canceled a secret meeting he had arranged with Taliban and Afghan leaders aimed at ending America's longest war.
They're dead. They're dead. As far as I'm concerned, they're dead. They thought that they had to kill people in order to put themselves in a little better negotiating position. When they did that, they killed 12 people. One happened to be a great American soldier, a wonderful young man from Puerto Rico, families from Puerto Rico. And you can't do that. You can't do that with me. So they're dead as far as I'm concerned. And we've hit the Taliban harder in the last 4 days than they've been hit in over 10 years. So that's the way it is.
Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says the Trump administration walked away from talks because the Taliban needs to change its behavior.
Finally, these attacks have caught up with the administration here in the United States, and they pulled out of talks. There is actually a debate here. Should we invite them to Camp David? Should we not? Should we have sat down with the Taliban or not?
Lisa will have more on terrorist threats and the latest with the trade war between the U.S. and China coming up after business news. The Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms is an intervener in an unusual case before the BC Court of Appeals. To talk more about it now is lawyer Jay Cameron, who joins me via Skype from Calgary. Jay, can you share with our viewers some of the background of this case?
This case involves a father and a mother who got divorced. They have 2 children, and the divorce was somewhat acrimonious. The children were upset and traumatized. At the age of 11, the child, who had been previously known as the father's daughter, saw a movie where she saw somebody who was a trans person in the movie. And according to what was said in court last week, she immediately, or the child immediately said, that's me. The child had been self-harming. There was some suicidality. There was a lot of trauma and angst because of the divorce and perhaps because of other factors. And the child ended up at the BC Children's Hospital speaking to psychologists who said that her gender dysphoria, or the child's gender dysphoria, would best be treated by affirmation and puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. And so the hospital decided that that's what it was going to do, and the child consented to it with the consent of the mother as well, and the father objected to it.
Now, if the father loses the case, what are the implications for parents?
The implications are significant because, according to what was said in court last week, there are a lot of kids, and this is just in one province, but the BC Children's Hospital has been transitioning kids at a fairly alarming rate. My understanding is that 1,000 kids have been transitioned, and approximately 500 of them are in foster care. And they're in foster care presumably because the recommended treatment does not accord with parents' best judgment. And so parents are saying, look, we're concerned about what you want to do. We think our kids should go through puberty first, not be given cross-sex hormones. And the hospital is saying, well, your child has given consent. And so this becomes, if the father loses the case, or you get more of these cases, it creates a precedent whereby the state medical establishment can override parental objection to what essentially is a very uncertain and experimental treatment.
Jay Cameron with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, thanks for joining me today from Calgary.
Thanks very much, Shel.
More rain and cool again today, but the temperature will be increasing later this week. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. Overcast with showers again today in many parts of southwestern Alberta. Tonight, more rain developing with a low near 7. Showers off and on with a high expected near 14 degrees tomorrow. Thursday, the rain clouds will leave, bringing us lots of sunshine and a high near 20. Even warmer at 23 degrees on Friday under a partly cloudy sky. A nice weekend is shaping up, just a few clouds and 22 for both Saturday and Sunday. Monday mainly cloudy with the mercury dropping to 19. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 21 degrees and an average low of 6. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1968 at 32 degrees, and the record low was a chilly -2 in 1955. Sunrise was at 6:59, sunset at 7:57. Looking at tomorrow's national forecast now, Victoria will have a mixture of sun and cloud and should see a high near 20. Mainly cloudy and 21 degrees for Vancouver. A good chance of showers and 13 for Calgary on Wednesday. Drizzle and 13 as well for Edmonton. Periods of rain and 12 degrees is on tap for both Regina and Saskatoon tomorrow. Expect lots of clouds and a high near 16 for Winnipeg. A mixture of sun and cloud and a high of 28 for Toronto. Thunder showers and 26 degrees for Ottawa. A good chance of showers and 24 for Montreal. Over the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will have showers and 21. Halifax, Nova Scotia will have rain and 17. Charlottetown, PEI will have showers and 16. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, a slight chance of thunder showers and a high of 18 degrees for tomorrow. The Alberta government says it is now compiling the input for more than 24 consultations it held on the repeal of the previous NDP government's farm safety legislation. The UCP says it is working with Alberta Labour and Immigration on data analysis, policy options, and plans to introduce the Farm Freedom and Safety Act as part of the fall session. The previous government changed the Occupational Health and Safety Code to make farm and ranch workers subject to the same health and safety requirements as workers in other industries. Agriculture Minister Devin Tereshan says he heard from close to 1,000 farmers, ranchers, and workers across Alberta. He says they're taking the feedback and building, quote, common sense farm legislation that works for the people and not against them. Suncor Energy is spending $1.4 billion to replace its coke-fired boilers in Fort McMurray with new units that will provide steam generation. They'll be used for extraction and for upgrading the Northern Alberta plant. Suncor says the change will help reduce costs and reduce greenhouse gas emissions as well. The project is expected to be in service in the second half of 2023. The pace of new housing starts beat analyst estimates. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says the seasonally adjusted annual rate of starts was up 1.9% to just over 226,500 units. Economists on average had expected an annual pace of 215,000. CMHC says the 6-month moving average on starts increased to 219,000, which is the highest level since June of last year. 3 new iPhone models that were unveiled today by Apple were not expected to be much different from last year's lineup. The company will show off its latest phones at its headquarters in California. They may, however, be upstaged by the company's upcoming video service called Apple TV+. Apple is facing pressure to generate revenue as a new study suggests iPhone shipments plunged 25% during the first half of this year. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta government officially filed with the Alberta Court of Appeal today in connection with the federal government's Bill C-69, or as Premier Jason Kenney refers to it, the No More Pipelines Bill. The province said they will be launching a constitutional challenge against the bill, which was passed by the Senate in June. The appeal says C-69 is unconstitutional and changes need to be made. The bill deals with assessing industrial projects for their effects on public health, the environment, and the economy. Former Reform Party MP Deborah Gray stopped by our studio recently and has some advice for Christian politicians. Details are coming up with BCN's Paul Arthur next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The 30th Annual Giant Pumpkin Festival and Auction in support of the Children's Wish Foundation is taking place Saturday, September 28th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Greenhaven Garden Center. Come out and enjoy face painting, wagon rides, a petting zoo, plus a live and silent auction, and much more. All proceeds benefit the Children's Wish Foundation in Southern Alberta. Big Brothers Big Sisters in Lethbridge is searching for volunteers to mentor children and youth in their various programs. Volunteers commit anywhere from 1 hour a week to 1 full year. They have many kids on their wait list that are looking for a big brother or sister. Make a difference in a child's life and start something big. For more information, call 403-328-9355 or email info.leth@bigbrothersbigsisters.ca. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Our guest today is a Canadian history maker, becoming the very first Reform Party Member of Parliament, and later becoming Deputy Leader of the Reform Party under Preston Manning, Deborah Gray. So good to have you with us here on Bridge City News.
Thank you. It's fun. I'm glad to be here, and anybody under 30 is going to say, "Who's that old lady there?" But
a lot of our viewers know exactly who you are.
And I just had such a great run. Just wonderful.
15 years, I think, right?
I was in over 15 years. So I was in 15 years. I got elected in '89, left in the '04 election, and now all of a sudden I've been out 15 years. So I find it astounding when anyone says, "Oh yeah, Deb Gray, I remember you," and I get recognized for my voice as much as I do my face, which is aging, but
you look good.
Oh, thanks. It's great. I'm still riding a motorcycle, because I'm sure everyone who's watching this is saying, "She rode a motorcycle. I wonder if she still does." Yes, I do. This is my 52nd year riding, and I'm loving it.
Oh, keep doing it as long as you can. I mean, that's great. Yeah, people remember you too for being sharp-witted. You know, you had a sharp tongue. Man, you know, you had some fun with that. And you have quite the history. Your legislative assistant was a young fella named Stephen Harper.
Yeah. Well, of course, I had no idea I was going to win right on election night until in the by-election in '89. After the general election in '88, the Conservative fellow died, so we were thrown into a by-election situation right away. And so I had no idea I was going to win until I saw CBC, CTV, all the major networks drove out to little old St. Paul in northeastern Alberta in the middle of Beaver River. And I thought, what are these guys doing here? And they said, we think you're going to win. And I said, this was on by-election night. And I thought, well, really? Well, we'll see what happens. And I took 50% of the vote that night. So it was a big shock. I did not have staff lined up. In fact, I didn't even know what a member of parliament actually did. So when I was in Ottawa interviewing a woman for the position, and she had worked for a Conservative MP before, but he didn't run again. And so I had no idea what an MP did. So I said, so tell me, what do you know about running an MP office? Because I knew nothing. So she gave me a little brief about that, about setting it up, and then who you're going to get for correspondence. I thought, yikes. And then she said, who are you going to get as your legislative assistant, the more political person? And so I thought, well, I really don't know. But I was in contact with Preston a lot, obviously, because there was a lot riding on it. You know, if you're going to have one MP there for 4.5 years till the next election, that was a little bit of pressure too. Because if you look or act like an idiot, chances are your career and everyone else's coming behind you is over as well. So he just cajoled and hornswoggled Stephen into coming down as my legislative assistant. And he said, I'll come for 1 year. He was in the middle of his master's degree in economics. And like I would never advocate anyone to quit, take a year off in the middle of university. But he did and came down. He said, I'll come for 1 year. And he did. Incredible. And what a big fat blessing that was for me. But I just appreciated Preston's incredible vision. I always say we're kind of always working, you know, 1 week, you know, maybe 1 year ahead. And Preston had this vision for a decade out. Same with Stephen. Just amazing foresight and long-term planning and a big, big vision for the country. We're seeing the same here with Jason Kenney in Alberta. You know, we hired Jason when he was a kid. I hired Stephen when he was a kid.
Wow.
I was 36 and he was 29.
Oh, man.
And then we hired Andrew Scheer when he was a kid. So when I'm the grand gray old lady of reform, it really is true to be so blessed to watch these people just come into their own in their political life as certainly in the business of politics, but in the mission of saying this is our country. And we really believe in it, so that's why we're here.
What about Western alienation? Of course, that was a huge part of reform. And of course, it's big back to, you know, it's back big time now. I mean, it's a major issue here in Alberta and the prairies and so forth. What needs to change to give the West a sense that we're part of it, we're back in?
Yes. Well, that's right. I mean, we said the West wants in, then the West got in. And when you look at what's happening, SNC Lavalin, if I go back to that, Justin was lobbying for, he said 9,000 jobs, turned out to be 3,500 that he was trying to save in Quebec. The last count I saw, and it's probably higher now, 130,000 unemployed in Alberta. And you go, woohoo, you know, how about us up here? What about us out here in Western Canada?
So
and it's like it's just ignored that. So I can see those sentiments coming forward.
Yeah. Big part of this then is the energy sector, essentially. I mean, you got Bill C-69, C-48. I mean, these are, in Alberta anyway, seen as economy killers.
Exactly. And just absolute bias towards Alberta with the pipeline and into BC and BC, where they've banned oil tanker traffic on the north coast of BC. Hello? There's the St. Lawrence. That's part of Canada. They have oil tankers in and out of there. Hibernia. If we're a country, we need to stand as a country, and that bill specifically deals with the north coast of BC. There's American tankers up there all the time.
Yeah, Alberta noticed that.
Alberta noticed that, yeah.
For sure. Now, I guess it seems like the Liberals are taking a gamble on this, that, you know, these kind of bills are going to resonate with voters who are particularly sensitive to the environmental issues, climate change, and again, some of the polls are showing that it's I think the number 3 issue in this election. So, you know, it's a gamble that may pay off for them. Do you think it'll work?
It may pay off for them. It may split the vote, some because the Greens come up and the NDP try and claim that territory. But it just makes me mad. I'm not going to sue and I'm not going to be deeply offended. But what the corollary of that is, we love the environment. You Conservatives don't love the environment. Well, that's just a bunch of hooey. I mean, to say that we don't appreciate the environment, we're all living, breathing the same air. And so, of course, Conservatives are concerned about that. What we're trying to do is be honest and balance environmental concerns with economic concerns, and to be able to say there's room for both of them in there. And so if they vote on that and try and be so self-righteous, and I find, sadly, so many of them are so humorless, that you can't have a debate, but they're so self-righteous. I say, wait a minute, I actually care about the environment myself.
Okay, just
And
have a different approach.
Exactly. And so this pipeline to get done, I was having a discussion just yesterday morning early with somebody who is riding her motorcycle actually up through Alberta right now. And she said that she thought there was some pipeline activity. And everyone who is up in arms about the pipeline, they need to do some this is as if this is going to be the first pipeline ever. In fact, it's twinning an existing one.
Right.
And in fact, I just Googled it yesterday. Canada has 840,000 kilometers of pipeline right now.
That's a lot of pipeline.
That's a lot of pipeline.
Yeah.
So this is nothing new. But I live on Vancouver Island now.
Well, you know all about the protests
I know all
there
about it.
and,
I
and
know
the,
all
and the
about
green
the
movement.
protests.
So
We get our oil from Washington State.
Interesting. Wow.
You know, I mean, we have tons of oil in Canada. Clean oil, I might add.
You know what, compared to the world, I mean, I do have to say, you know what,
So
Canadian oil, Alberta oil is very, very
That's
clean
right.
compared to the rest
Yeah.
of the world.
So somehow we need to be able to balance that, not way out on one side or the other.
Okay. Let me ask you about the Greens. You mentioned the Greens, and of course, you're living in BC now. What do you think? I mean, the trend has been, again, that they're starting to pick up momentum, right? You see it in the polls. You see some seats going their way. Could they gain a significant number of seats election night here on the on the West Coast and on the East Coast? Essentially, that's where their strength seems to lie.
There's a possibility for that. I mean, Elizabeth May's been in Parliament for quite a while now. She just doubled her caucus because this young fella, Paul Manley, won the seat in Nanaimo Ladysmith. Why was there a by-election? It's like playing chess. Leonard Krogh was an NDP MLA. Thought, oh, I'll be the mayor of Nanaimo, you know, so I don't have to go to Victoria all the time. So his seat's vacant. So then Sheila Malcolmson, NDP member of Parliament, says, oh, well, I might as well stay closer to home. So she comes to run in that, and it just goes round and round all the time here. But that fellow won a seat, and so she's just riding high right now. I think they'll gain in votes. I'm not sure that they're going to gain in seats. But if you have a minority parliament, as we do in BC right now, and it's just ugly, because you have 3 Green people that are absolutely calling the shots. They just sit back there and think, well, this is pretty cool. We have 3 seats, but we might as well be government, because they'll say yay or nay. I do not want to see that happen with either a Liberal minority or a Conservative minority in Parliament.
You're hoping for a majority either way?
I'm hoping for a majority, because minority Parliament, some stuff can get done, but it means that what we started talking about, you need rapprochement, you need to be able to get along together, and you need to be able to talk civilly and come up with bill by bill legislation. And there's so much animosity now, I don't know how well that could work. And I don't think Canadians want to go back to the polls again right away.
Let me ask you something. Ties in a bit personally, I guess. You're a Christian, and you know you've never really been shy about it, even when you were an MP. So these days, that can get you in a fair bit of trouble.
It can.
You know, certainly the media pounces on that as well, it seems. What advice would you have for anyone who's a politician and is a Christian in today's political climate?
When I think about as a believer, I went to camp. I went to Bible camp at Camp Homewood when I was a 13-year-old kid. Knew nothing about the gospel, nothing about Jesus. I became a Christian when I was 14. And so that has been my life. That's my mission. And if that isn't the most important thing in your life, then you're hooped. So you probably shouldn't run for Parliament if you're going to try and hide your light under a bushel. But that doesn't mean to say that I need to be stupid or foolish about it, does it? So Preston talks about being wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And I think that's very smart, so that I would live my faith so that people realize that I'm not ashamed of it, but to be able to say I can work in this area and do the best job I can do, and that my life as a Christian would be a blessing to others, and that I would serve my country to the best of my ability. But I think it's important to be smart. It's the same in any industry. It's just that when you're in political life and public life, nothing about your life is private. And so you need to be able to, you know, say, this is going to go coast to coast. And I used to say to my caucus when I was the den mother for many years, anything you say, just assume it's going to be on camera, or just assume it's going to be on the front page of the Globe and Mail or the National Post. So for a believer to be smart, and a believer to say, I am not going to compromise my positions. But again, as Preston used to say in the early days, life is about horse trading, isn't it? You do that in your family, you give some, you take some. And so that's what we need to be able to do
in the
without
political world.
compromising my core beliefs. And I will never shy away from telling anyone that I'm a Christian.
Social issues, we should touch base on that briefly too. I mean, there's always a fear campaign that gets launched in a political, election campaign against conservatives, it seems, mainly over abortion and LGBTQ issues and so forth. So we end up with some tap dancing, don't we, right? So on the one hand, you need to appease, I guess, the faith-based voters and supporters. And at the same time, there's this reassurance that you typically send out to the rest of the supporters that no, nothing actually is going to change. It's going to stay the same. So you have this.
It's very difficult. It's a tightrope to walk. I struggled with this because we had an abortion vote way back when I was the only MP there. And again, Preston and I talked about this, and I thought what he said was very wise. From 1 Samuel 8, when Samuel said, look, they want a king. What am I supposed to do? They want a king. And the Lord said to them, you give them a king, and they are not responsible to you. They will be responsible to me in the end. That takes an awful lot of pressure out. That doesn't mean to say that you just go with whatever's going, but you take a stand, and people are ultimately responsible to God. And so I really appreciated that, and that has given me comfort and a lot of wisdom, I think, over the decades, not just the years.
Well, I've heard a number of faith leaders comment that, if any political leader today, whoever's in charge, actually decided to make abortion illegal, for example, you know what, we might say, oh, great, but reality is whoever did that in today's climate, the voters would boot them out very quickly, and it would not last. So ultimately, I think what they're saying is, you know what, if you want change, we can't actually leave that in the politicians' hands necessarily. That needs to come from the bottom up. When there's enough support from voters who say, you know what, we see this as a moral wrong and we need to change this, that's when politicians can actually do something about it.
And I would love to just legislate all kinds of things and say what, but Constantine did that too.
Right,
Say, okay, now it's a Christian nation. And it doesn't work that way. It needs to be heart to heart, person to person, communities standing up and saying that's when laws get changed.
Healthcare briefly, it's always a huge election issue, and everybody knows we need to fix it from all different parties, and we all make promises that way. So we throw money at it, and nothing changes, generally speaking. So your thoughts? How can it get fixed?
Do you keep throwing money at something? I mean, that has proved to not be very effective. And again, this all comes down to this whole we have single-tier healthcare system in Canada, as though we are so virtuous. Almost 30% of healthcare services are offered in the private realm. And so let's not fudge around that. So, if I go to, if I want an MRI and I want to pay for it, I'm allowed to do that. Paul Martin did that. He went to a clinic and they said you could wait on this line here, or we could get you over here. So he gave his credit card. Paul Martin did that as the Minister of Finance. So first of all, let's be brutally honest about this, that we don't have single-tier health care. We get to have some things covered. If you go to the chiropractor, you have to pay. If you go for massage, you have to pay. So it's not single-tier. But what we need to do is come up with a balance of what's going to work best for people, because we already have private public health care. And so somehow we need to come up with a balance of what's going to give us baby boomers good care. We are this enormous bulge in the population, born between 45 and 60 some, and that's me. I just turned 67 on July 1st, and somehow we're going to be all the people in the old folks' homes for the next years, and that's going to cost a fortune. So somehow we need to be able to balance that out and say we're not living under the myth that this is just single-tier healthcare. So money, energy, resources, time needs to go into figuring that out.
Yeah, somehow we seem scared of any privatization methods in Canada, even though countries like Sweden and Switzerland and the UK, very similar, I think, mindset, that they seem to be doing that just fine.
Am I advocating for, for all private health care? No, I'm not. And someone will watch this program and say, oh, I heard Deb Gray, she's in favor of privatizing the health care. No, I'm not. No. But what I'm saying is, the truth is, it's already 30% is private.
Right. So let's again, a combination is what you're kind of
where you're going to be able to say we have these dollars, and we have Deb Gray with bad knees. And where I live, they say to me, "Are you kidding?" I was 62 when I first went to the doctor, and she said, "Whoa, you're way too young. Come see me in a decade."
Wow.
But I can still ride my motorcycle, so I bless the Lord.
Deborah Gray, thank you so much for making time for us here today.
Right on. I'm glad to, and bless you and your ministry here too.
It appears as though peace talks in Afghanistan are dead, but the United States is apparently trying to keep the pressure on the Taliban. Joining me now to talk a bit about it is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again via Skype from Los Angeles. Lisa, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo left the Taliban at the table, saying the group needs to change their behavior a little bit.
Finally, right, Hal? We've been talking about this for how long now? Watching the Taliban attack after attack, and still get away with being invited back to the table for negotiations with the United States as the only viable future for Afghanistan. I mean, since when do we negotiate with terrorists, right? And now that finally, these attacks have caught up with the administration here in the United States, and they pulled out of talks. There is actually a debate here. Should we invite them to Camp David? Should we not? Should we have sat down with the Taliban or not? And it's interesting to see this literal Monday morning quarterbacking while we have been talking about this for such a long time and watching these horrific attacks by the Taliban. They're a terror organization. There's no reason to give in to the bullying tactics and these intimidation tactics when so many innocent civilians and Americans, and others have died at the hands of the Taliban. And for what? Why should we be rewarding them? So of course they're on alert. This pressure will continue, but we will verify and then trust, as Mattis said in an interview with media outlets yesterday.
Now, the Afghan government actually praised the Trump administration for the suspension of the U.S. Taliban negotiations. One of the recent quotes I read from a government official said they hold our nation hostage and yet pay lip service to peace.
Exactly. Where does this make sense? Where, they continue to vilify, they continue to terrorize the Afghani people. Of course, the Afghani government is, very happy that the talks were called off, very happy that there's a pressure campaign against the Taliban, and very happy that hopefully this will be the beginning of the end for the Taliban and this, this ability to just launch a suicide attack whenever they feel like it in these civilian areas in order to do what? To mark their territory, in order to have leverage, to have a leg up. They literally said that they did this in order to have leverage or a leg up when they sit down at the negotiating table with the United States. I mean, it's horrific. It's horrific. So, of course, we have support by the Afghani government. We have support of the Afghani people who have only been victims to this horrific, long-drawn ordeal with the Taliban. And, the most important question here is what will happen with Afghanistan? What is the future of that nation? How could they nation build? How can they move forward? And that's a very difficult question to answer. Are they a threat to the United States and to the West? Yes, because they have become such a fertile ground for terrorists to develop. And of course, again, the number one victims of that terrorism and that vulnerability being the Afghani people in that region. So, eyes on Afghanistan, we pulled out, but we don't want to hand this over yet again to another terror group on a silver platter.
Pompeo says the key to a successful Iran is disarming the nation and appealing directly to its people.
Yeah, I've been saying this for over, a decade and a half now. This is the key to understanding the Iranian issue, is to know how different the people are from its government. Funny, because I got invited to Congress in 2004 or 5 to talk about this in a subcommittee and talk about the third option with Iran. The first and second being either bomb Iran, let them get the bomb. The third option being to appeal to the people in order to topple their government. And when you look at this regime, 40 years or more of them being in power, and the people of Iran being, having it up to here in terms of tolerating the human rights abuses, the economy being in shambles, all of this horrific, realities that they live with day in and day out. And the West, in trying to curb the Iranian regime, is missing the biggest ally of all, 80 million Iranian people who'd be happy to come back out onto the streets if they knew that they had a Western partner in curbing their government. So I think it's wonderful that Pompeo is sending out this message. Of course, we get stuck at are these just words, or what can the United States do to support the people of Iran in the next chapter if they are even successful in toppling their regime? So I think there's a lot of questions that remain, but I think this is a great first step in our administration's policy towards Iran.
Now, speaking of Iran, samples taken by the UN nuclear watchdog show traces of uranium at what Israel's prime minister is calling a secret atomic warehouse, Lisa. Should we be concerned here in the West?
Absolutely, but is this shocking? No. Do we know that they were going against the nuclear deal? Absolutely, yes. And when can we say, I told you so? When can we, it's very ironic because today Bibi Netanyahu tweeted this out, that they did locate another site, and Javad Zarif, who is the foreign minister of Iran, tweeted out, look who's talking. Basically, Israel's the one with the nuclear weapon, and Bibi Netanyahu is the real terrorist, and all that, nonsense. And this news came out once again that even the UN, that has such a hard time calling out the Iranian regime, the watchdog group that has been monitoring, says that there has been nuclear activity that goes against the nuclear deal. Now, who does this put into the most awkward position? The Europeans, who are on a ticking deadline in order to give an answer to the Iranians on whether or not they will join back into a nuclear deal with them so that they can continue trade, they can continue their economic relationship. But again, these are inconvenient truths that do not make the Iranian regime look good. It doesn't make future relations look good. It doesn't make any sort of rapprochement with Iran look like it's going to happen in the near future. And they have a lot of explaining to do. Again, nothing new, but I'm glad that this evidence is coming to the surface.
Lisa, the trade war continues between the United States and China. Imports of American products to China dropped about 22% last month. And Chinese exports to the United States also plummeted by about 16%. It's kind of tit for tat with the tariffs.
Absolutely, and it continues, even though there is some prospect of having future talks in the very, very near future. Of course, both sides, and I think people on both sides who do business, import-export with either China or the U.S., are looking for a very fast resolution to all of this because everyone's suffering, right? Who wants to pay all this extra tariffs on very basic things that are necessary, especially as we approach the holiday season here in the West, and especially as we approach a re-election here in the United States? I think this is something that, many people, especially Wall Street, are looking to see if Donald Trump can resolve this issue before his, re-election or at least the campaign season kicks off. So what we see is day in and day out that there is this fluctuation in the market in terms of, the news coming out of the U.S.-China trade deal. Will there be a deal? Will there, can we count on these tariffs going away anytime soon? And in the meantime, as you said, there's a decline because nobody wants to pay these tariffs and the prices are just exorbitant.
The Turkish military is entering Syria to begin a joint U.S. safe zone patrol. What will that actually look like?
What should it look like versus what will it look like? I think that's the more nuanced way of looking at this. Look, the Turks have been wanting to get involved and have been getting involved in Syria for a very long time, and because of their own agenda. Now, the West, the United States in particular, led a coalition in Syria and wanted Turkey to be involved. Why? Because they are geographically desirable. Their country is a place where we could basically set up and launch from. And they can help us out in Turkey. Now, why did the Turks get involved? Because their only goal and agenda in Syria is to kill off the Kurds. They don't want the Kurds to have a free and independent state of Kurdistan. They don't want them to exist. They want them off the map. They want them off the planet. And that's exactly why they got involved. Now, every time we see that Turkey volunteers to do more of this charity work in Syria, you have to ask yourself, why are they getting involved? How are they getting involved? And what will this have to do with where the Kurds are? Now, this joint project with the United States, it might be just a bit naive on the part of the United States to get involved with them, to set up areas that are safe zones so that they can move people to and from these areas in order that they stay out of harm's way, and that they continue to monitor these areas that they don't become, again, fertile ground for insurgencies to grow once again, whether it's ISIS or another group. So again, in theory, this is wonderful. Of course, we'd want, these areas to stay terror-free and crime-free and safe for people and children, families, etc. But again, there's so many layers to this crisis in Syria, and it continues. And I think, when you see the United States having, trying to at least extract itself from the situation, it's because this equation has no solution. And there's just, again, so many different layers to it, so many different nuances here. And really, what do we want at the end of the day? We want to create a situation that's stable and safe, and I don't know if that's going to come anytime soon.
Lisa, yet another rocket was fired at southern Israel from Gaza as Egypt is seeking to calm tensions there. Tell me more about that.
This continues. Israel is fighting on so many different fronts, and the Hamas in Gaza has not stopped. There's never a dull moment in that part of the world, as you know. And you have Israel, a country the size of New Jersey, dodging these bullets with the Iron Dome, with their military apparatus, with these bomb shelters, which families and young children and kindergartens, and they're used to this life of having to get into the bomb shelter in the middle of the day when sirens go off, because they're either being attacked from the north, from the south, from the Gaza Strip. And this just continues. I think right now, in particular, the world is fixated on Iran, on the oil tankers, on what Donald Trump is tweeting, etc. And I think people are looking the other way. That's when these terror groups mobilize, and that's when they plan and they attack. And we've always said this, whether it's about Europe or the United States or Canada or Israel. When you live in a country that is it pushes freedom and justice, and you go back to life as usual even after one of these attacks. But these terror organizations, they get fueled by countries like Iran, like Qatar, and they continue to go back to plotting the next attack and the next attack and the next attack. It's like playing whack-a-mole. So fortunately, just a day in the Middle East.
Central Hong Kong has been hit with violence after Lamb's Bacon session. Hong Kong police, meanwhile, fired tear gas as clashes erupt after thousands appealed to Trump to liberate the city, Lisa.
Yes, this is a beautiful story here. People singing the Star-Spangled Banner and asking for help from the United States. I mean, it's not every day you see this, and it's not every day that you see a country so far away, geographically speaking, and isolated, in so many ways, appealing to the United States for help, singing the Star-Spangled Banner. And before, we had stories of them flying the U.S. flag. So, the stories continue about these protests, and that's because this has grown into something that is impossible to contain at this point, because people are disenchanted and they want better, and they know that the Chinese are on their best behavior, so to speak, because they have other bigger issues to contend with, mainly the U.S. and the trade deals going on, and that they will behave to a certain point and not turn this into the bloodbath that they would have had this been under any different circumstances in terms of timing. So I think the people of Hong Kong are really taking the issue of time to their advantage. They're out on the streets, they're brave, they're courageous, and again, looking to the United States for some help here to gain more freedoms and to gain their independence from China.
Across the pond, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson drew up plans to sabotage any Brexit extension without breaking the law. Now, it means that the upcoming vote on a general election is the last chance for MPs to block a no-deal Brexit.
This Brexit issue has dragged on forever, and Boris Johnson is just, I don't know if he's fighting something that he truly believes in, but he also has opponents who will do anything to stop this or to stop a no-deal Brexit and to make it illegal. So now Boris Johnson is trying to legally stop them from doing so. I think we've talked about this before, but I'll say it again. Brexit came before the Trump presidency, before Trump was elected into office. And the way that people talked about Brexit, or the idea of Brexit, is that it was a very organic idea to break from the EU, meaning that it's almost like a child that outgrows the family and has to move out of the house. It's something that just needs to happen. And I think what the people here need to understand is that if there will be a break with the EU, there will be a break with the EU, whether it's formalized or not, whether it's whether there's a deal or a no deal, or whether it's now or in 2 years. This will creep up again. And it behooves the people of the UK to truly sit down and stop being so spiteful of one another and of political parties. And the partisanship is just awful. And to work with one another to see what is best for the future of the country, what's best for their national security, which led to Brexit, what's best for their trade, what's best for their economy. These are all factors that led to Brexit. Again, Brexit being the precursor to what we said was the Donald Trump election here in the United States, which was also a much needed reform or a referendum on what was going on here in this country. So if it's a reaction, if it's an action, it will creep up again. So, a lot of this infighting, but let's see where it takes the country.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftar, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.